Up next on Inside the SCCA, Thunderhill Super Tour Preview. Welcome to Inside the SCCA. I'm Brian Bielanski. Tonight we're talking about the Hoosier Racing Tire SCCA Super Tour coming up this weekend at Thunderhill. I'll be there with Larry McLeod. Lefty and I are going to bring all the coverage to you from Thunderhill this weekend. And as we have been doing all season long, we've got a special guest today who knows a little bit about Thunderhill. Joining us right now is our good friend, Jim Devenport. Jim, how are you?
I'm doing great.
That's great to hear. Great to hear. Welcome. And I appreciate you taking some time. I know you're about ready to get on the road to go up to Thunderhill right now. So we'll get to that in just a minute. First of all, I start every podcast the same way, and that is with a simple question. How did you get messed up in this crazy sport that we love?
That's a good one. You know, I was always kind of a motorhead when I was in high school and college. In fact, I autocrossed Corvairs. That was kind of my first competitive thing. But I attended Laguna Seca multiple times, and I was there in 1973 when Mark Donahue ran the 9:17:30 and just crushed the field at Laguna. I watched him come through the corkscrew. I sat there on the fence, and I vowed then and there someday I was going to race cars. And, you know, it was a big delay. You start a life and a career, and didn't get my shot till I was 50 years old, and went to a Skip Barber race school at Laguna Seca with my son, by the way. My wife gave it to my son and I as kind of a father-son bonding experience. I think he was 18 at the time. And I did that, enjoyed it immensely, and vowed at that point in time I was going to continue on with that. And bought a Spec Racer Ford, had it built, and started in 17 years ago. So here we are.
So what did you do between Laguna Seca and Mark Donahue and 17 years ago?
Built a career.
Yeah.
And basically hopefully made enough money I can keep racing the rest of my life now.
I always think about Roger Penske. So someone asks him, how do you become a rich race car driver, race car owner? And he says, you start by being a filthy rich race car owner. So, so my story's similar. I went to Road America in '85 and saw Jeff Brabham in the IMSA GTP Nissan. And that's where I discovered racing and cars. And then my dad was involved back in the 60s, then got back involved, and the rest is, as they say, history. So what is it about that got you? You said you went to Spec Racer. Well, was it Spec Racer Ford at that point, or was it still Sports Renault?
Nope, it was Spec Racer Ford.
Okay. When you got into that, what was the reason for choosing that first?
You know, I went up to Thunderhill. I did the Skip Barber Race School in there. I think they called their thing Formula Dodge or something like that. And then I went and did another race weekend at Sonoma in the Jim Russell Formula Mazda cars. So then after that, I decided, well, it's time to kind of look further into a situation to get a car. I went up to Thunderhill, spent the weekend there just kind of watching, observing, and saw the Spec Racers go around. It appealed to me. It was open cockpit. It was a purpose-built race car, had big fields. The fact that it was, a spec car, so basically put the premium on driver talent. I felt that at that point you could find out whether you were any good or not. You didn't have to have a whole lot of investment in the car and all that stuff. So that's what attracted me to it. As soon as I started doing it, within a few months, I liked it so much I went ahead and bought an FE at the time too. So I started going the double and did that basically for 7 years, running Spec Racer Ford and FE, and had a moderate amount of success in it. Ultimately decided I wanted to try some endurance racing and bought my first Norma.
Okay.
And that was to run, NASA was running some endurance events on the West Coast here and did that. I did a few of them, but I realized quickly I didn't like, running 80, 90%, all about saving the car. I really liked all out, going all out. 30 minutes going all out in a sports racer, like, these P1 cars. That's a physical challenge because those things generate, 3 Gs. and they're fast, and to give it everything you've got, it's pretty physically taxing. So that's kind of how I ended up where I'm at now.
It's funny because when I started, I always told people, like, this is before the advent of the internet where you could watch races and in-car video. You know, we had big video cameras that were the size of my head. When someone said, what's a sports Renault? That was what I started in. I'm like, well, it's kind of like a mini prototype car. And because it kind of had that look to it. There's really little to compare other than kind of body style, right, between the Spec Racer Ford and the P1 cars?
Yeah, just simply a sports racer. But one's at one end of the spectrum and the other one's at the total opposite end. But, the quality of the driving in the Spec Racer fields is still really phenomenal.
Right.
Guys like John Black and Denny Stripling and the Harrises. And I mean, it's pretty spectacular. I haven't hopped in one for a couple of years now, but every once in a while I'd get back in one and I go run and could still, wheel it around pretty decently. But the problem is I would tend to overdrive it, try and make it do things, my P1 car could do, and it's not going to happen. So
sure. So what did you learn in, let's start with Spec Racer Ford, that you're able to then take to the Formula Enterprises car and now to the P1 car?
All about smoothness, carrying momentum, and that's where, in my opinion, everybody that starts out racing in SCCA, they should either have to start in a Formula Ford or a Spec Racer Ford. I see so many people that, maybe they're getting up in age and they go, I don't want to go through that. I don't want to pay my dues. And they'll buy a car and they'll never get up to speed because they never learned the basics of how to drive these things. And so that's the biggest thing in those spec classes, especially Spec Racer Ford, where smoothness and being able to carry momentum through the corners is what those cars are all about. You can't lift, can't make big mistakes, or you'll never be at the front.
Yeah, I tell the same thing to parents who come up to me and say, I want to get my kid involved in racing, and maybe they've got a year or two in karts, or maybe they don't have any experience at all, and they want to go right into an F2000 or something like that. And I try to convince people that if you're wasting your money to go right into that because you won't know what you're doing there, and you'll learn more in just even one season in Formula Ford or Formula V or Spec Racer Ford. You'll learn all of that foundation and fundamentals that will help you actually get more out of your next season when you get to one of those more high horsepower cars.
Yeah, I agree entirely.
So from Spec Racer Ford to FE, I guess it wasn't an FE2 at that point. How was that jump?
It wasn't bad. I mean, I had many times where I'd be back to back. I'd finish one, have to hop out on grid and hop in the other one. And it never gave me any problems kind of going back and forth. Later in 2016, after we won our first runoffs in the Norma, they started messing with the rules and clipping my Norma back. And in fact, for a while there, we didn't even have a car to run because they stripped it back so badly and said we had to run an SIR, which we couldn't put on the car. So I actually bought a Spec Racer Ford again and an FE that we were one of the first to convert it over to FE2, to the new motor and the new transmission. So I actually got back in running them again and found it just as challenging, just as fun. But the problem was when I would try and run, when we finally got the Norma sorted out, we were able to run it again. I found it very difficult to go from the Norma back in the Spec Racer Ford, say in the same weekend.
Okay.
The differences in speed and cornering ability were so radical. It was hard to do in a weekend. I could do it when I just focused on it, one car during the weekend, but it was hard to make that transition around.
Is that because the braking points, the turn-in points, all of that were so much radically different between the two?
Absolutely.
Yeah, because the Norma must have had great brakes. You go much deeper, and obviously corners better, right?
Yes.
Definitely. So now fast forward to your runoffs win. How tell me about that week.
Well, it was pretty interesting. I ran regionally around here in the Spec Racer Ford and the FE, bought the Norma, did the endurance thing, then finally decided to run it at, and I think it was still CSR at the time. It hadn't quite converted.
Right.
And I ran it for maybe a year or two and realized, wow, this car's good. I'm fast in it. And then they made the conversion to P1, and that was in 2014. And the runoffs were coming to the West Coast for the first time in forever at Laguna Seca, home track. I go, well, I guess now's my chance to step up and try and do the runoffs. So we ran there at Laguna, and the podium, finished third. It was second for a long time. Let's see, Chris Farrell won. Lee Alexander got around me, finished second. I finished third. And I was stoked at that point. I was totally hooked. So at that point, we started developing the Norma more. The next year in 15, we went to Daytona. I had a small field. I finished second, but we'd made a lot of progress in development of the car. And in 16, it was Mid-Ohio. And so we actually bought a crate of a new Norma, and Jason Holman at Bulldog Motorsports assembled the car 3 months before the runoffs. We ran it at Laguna. We went back to Mid-Ohio in a regional race, smoked the field in that, then went back to the runoffs and basically dominated the whole runoffs event. Put it on pole and had an awesome runoffs finish. And that was the biggest highlight at that point in time in my career. We were pretty jazzed, and we were able to complete the super sweep at that particular event too.
Sure. So I see a bunch of hardware behind you. Is that the runoffs trophy over your right shoulder there?
I've actually got those in Scottsdale at a different place where I live, but the one over my right shoulder, that's a second from Indy 2 years ago in 2021, the year Lee Alexander won. And the ones on the left are some Super Tour trophies from this season. Cool. So thought I'd at least put a little background for you.
Absolutely. So let's talk about Indy for just a second. You know, I grew up, like a lot of people, watching the Indy 500, thinking to myself, that's not a place I'll ever get to, because at that point in time, the only race all year long, the only thing they did at Indianapolis Motor Speedway was the month of May in the Indianapolis 500. And then they did the Brickyard and all the things that added. And then I saw this, thing flashed across my screen, runoffs at Indy. And I'm thinking, Lucas Motorsports Park, which was IRP. And I had to wipe my tuchus off the floor when I read that SCCA was going to race at Indianapolis Motor Speedway. Going through the tunnel, knowing you're going to drive at Indy, tell me what that moment was like.
Yeah, no, I had gone to the 500 back in 2005 as a surprise 50th birthday party that my wife had a limo pull up and said, get in the car, we're going somewhere. I didn't know where till we got in the airplane and landed there. So I'd been through the experience in the museum, but going there, knowing you're going to drive was a whole nother level of excitement. And it was pretty exhilarating, as you know. I mean, they got 1,000 entries. It was phenomenal.
Sure.
By far the most successful runoffs ever. So it was a lot of fun.
I'm assuming if they went back, you'd be there.
Yeah, I'd go for the third time. I hear Roger likes us and would invite us back again. So the 17, that was my biggest disappointment at the runoffs. We went back there. We were on pole. We had the field covered. Had a big lead. I think it was 15 seconds or something. That was the year the fields were so big, they were nervous about getting it all done, and they paired us with the F1000 cars. And that turned into be a disaster. We were so much quicker than them, but those things had pretty good acceleration. And as I was moving through the field and coming down to, I can't remember which corner it is, but it's that complex right before you go onto the front straight.
Yeah, 14,
I
15.
was trying to pass a guy on the outside. It was an F1000 car. I don't think he knew I was there. He started squeezing me up against the wall. So I was sitting there looking at him, missed my brake point. It went off in the grass and then stalled it, and then had a heck of a time getting it started up. So anyway, it ended in a big disappointment. We charged back through the field, made it to the podium. Then we had a red flag that stopped the whole event. They couldn't get the timing. We still had plenty of time to finish the race. I'd have been in a great spot, third with cars immediately ahead, but they couldn't get the timing system back up and had to call the race. Then we found out the next morning after the podium celebrations, they backed the event up one full lap, and that was right before I'd passed for third, so they took the podium away. So It was just one disappointment after another. Biggest heartache I've ever had at the runoffs.
Well, hopefully you'll get a chance to get back there. I know that a lot of people would be rooting for a return trip to Indy. So, and like you said, Mr. Penske has a long history with the SCCA, going way back into the day. So I would not be surprised if that gets back on the schedule here. So let's do this. The reason we got you here was to talk about Thunderhill, and I know you've got some time at that track. So let's take a quick break, and then when we come back, we'll get into what it takes to go quick at Thunderhill. Stay with us. We'll be back in just a minute. You're listening and watching to Inside the SCCA right here on the Racing Network and the Racingwire Podcast Network. Stay with us. We'll be right back. Decades of sports car racing success comes from Goodyear Racing Tires' dedication to grassroots motorsports. Too many trophies and championships to count, and a commitment to continuing that tradition fuels continued tire development. From the professional levels of motorsports to the pinnacle of amateur racing in the SCCA, Goodyear Racing Tires are made for winning trophies. Follow @RaceGoodyear on Facebook or scan the QR code. Goodyear Racing is more driven.
Sentinel by Candelaria Racing Products is a comprehensive motorsports video system, incorporating live streaming, local recording, picture-in-picture, flag status, leaderboards, data overlays, and more. Perfect for endurance racing, sprint racing, and HPDE, Sentinel includes everything you need to get started. With the ability to control the live feed from the cloud, and GPS Auto Start will never miss an on-track moment. What are you waiting for? Get your Sentinel today.
Vintage Racers for Rescues. Racers rescuing dogs and cats from high-kill rural shelters and high-risk situations. Virginia and North Carolina have the third highest euthanasia rate in the U.S., and Vintage Racers for Rescues founders Robin and Dave Handy decided to do something about it. Vintage Racers for Rescues is a 501c3 charity that saves between 300 and 400 animals every year, nursing them back to health, finding foster homes, and eventually forever homes. VintageRacersForRescues.com. Use the QR code to find them on the web or to make a donation.
Corgi Sport is your one-stop shop for new and used mini parts and accessories. Whether it's driven on the street or on the racetrack, we have everything you need. From the small interior parts all the way to used and rebuilt motors. And with our sponsorship of the GPM race team, who travel to more than 30 tracks east of the Mississippi, we have a built-in delivery system that can save money on delivering large parts. Our line of Corgi Sport apparel celebrates the special bond between mini owners and their dogs. Mention this ad for a 10% discount at corgisport.com.
Welcome back to Inside the SCCA. I'm Brian Bielanski. Jim Devenport is our guest this evening. We are live, getting ready for our Thunderhill Super Tour. And we're catching up with Jim and talking about all the fun he's had. Before we get to Super Tour, I have one last question for you. You waited 17 years to start racing. Are you happy you did because you're able to really do it kind of full on because you had gotten a little deeper into life and you'd had the money to do it rather than trying to struggle through the first couple of years if you'd really tried to go after it right out of high school or college?
You know, that's a good question. I actually regret that I didn't attempt to do something earlier just for the experience. But I do appreciate the fact that now I can do it the way I like to do it. I mean, I've got a great crew with Jason and Bulldog, and you know, they prep the car. I mean, it's a big deal to these prototypes to prep them properly. So I don't do any wrenching. I just show up and drive. So I'm appreciative of the fact I'm able to do that this way now.
Definitely. All right, we're heading to Thunderhill this weekend. It's kind of an interesting event. It's going to be a little unusual for folks who are used to how we normally do Super Tours. Usually all the racing is on Saturday and Sunday. Sometimes there's some qualifying on Friday. But this time we're going to qualify and race on Sunday, on Friday, and we're going to qualify and race on Saturday. And then there's a special San Francisco region event, the Western Shootout, on Sunday. So let's talk about first the Super Tour part of it. Super Tour is going to be on a couple versions of their shorter 3-point-something mile track, right, Jim?
Yes, I think it's just under 3 or right at 3.
Right.
And we'll run it the traditional way we normally do over the Crow's Nest. And then the unique twist is we're going to run the bypass on Saturday. And that's the configuration run in the famous 25 Hours of Thunderhill. And we've never run it that way in our SCCA regional events. So be a neat twist. It's a real thrill ride going over that thing. If you go off to the right side, you'll put the car airborne. So you have to enter that bypass on the left side, get the car straight because it gets really light going over the rise there. So I think everybody will appreciate it, slight difference. And then the 5 mile track on Sunday is going to be, I enjoy it. Some people don't like it. You know, it's had to mix the two tracks together. So the connections between the tracks is a little bit different, but it's a fun, fast flowing circuit through the backside there. Not a lot of passing opportunities, so it's a chance for whoever it is to gain on somebody, put themselves in a position at passing zones, or for the leader to stretch their lead out, so to speak. So it'll be physically challenging and physically demanding to run that.
So let's talk about the short courses first. What is the key to going fast at Thunderhill?
Well, same at any track. Entering onto the straightaways is the most important corners. There's a lot of passing zones on the 3 mile track. So coming around 14 and 15 and entering the front straight, that's obviously one of the key areas. Good passing at the end of that front straightaway. Actually, you can get a run and maybe not complete the pass into 1, but complete it into 2. You come out of 2, there's a brief moment there where you can actually pass going into 3. It's critical then to get through the crow's nest. Turn 6 is another fast corner that's very challenging to get through it quickly. And then over 9 and coming down into 10 is another passing zone there. And then getting through 11 and 12, 13, and heading into the back straight creates another good passing opportunity going down into 14 off the back straightaway. So it's a very challenging course. I love it. I actually think it's got a lot of flowing rhythm to it. Good brake zones. Also, it's safe. Not a lot of things to hit, so like you can go off and get away with it.
Yeah, definitely. And then when we switch it up for Saturday, how does that change the lap by using the bypass?
Well, like I said, we've never run it before in SCCA competition, so I don't know. The only thing it does is I think it'll work about the same way because you can't pass going into the crow's nest anyway, and you can't pass going over that bypass because to pass somebody, you'd have to take that steeper version that would literally launch you in the air. So it's kind of single file through that bypass section. It's just going to be a little bit quicker. The delta should be about 2 seconds different between the two track configurations.
Cool. And so with the crow's, it should be slower, right?
Yes.
Yeah, because you've got to slow down to make that little thing, and then I got you. Is there anything, any big problem areas on either on that configuration where you're gonna have to have like a throwaway corner to make something else work well?
No, I don't think so.
Okay, cool. What else do we need to know if we're going there?
Let's see. It's got plenty of paddock space. They've actually built a new store this year. I'm actually on the Thunderhill track board. The San Francisco region owns the track, and it's a separate entity. And it built a new store. Got lots of nice facilities there. Pavement's all in good shape. Track condition is still in excellent shape, even though it hasn't been resurfaced. I think it's going on maybe 12, 15 years now, but the track condition is still quite good.
So if it hasn't, is it slick, or is there still some grip to it since it hasn't been?
No, yeah, it's still got pretty good grip. Amazingly, we're having some rain locally right now, and the weather's going to be a little bit dicey, and temperatures are going to be in the high 60s. So if we can avoid damp conditions, the track will be exceedingly fast. Cloud cover, high 60s, it'll be fast. Now, if it rains off and on, that's a whole different animal, as we all know.
You were at Buttonwillow, right?
Yes.
I think no matter what we get this weekend, it'll be better than what we had at Buttonwillow.
Yeah. The rain is not supposed to be buckets.
Right.
It'd just be drizzle and spitting and that type of thing.
Yeah, it shouldn't be a washout by any stretch of the imagination. Talking about Sunday's event on the 5 mile circuit, any particular fast way to get through that extra section, that extra 2 miles?
The biggest thing, I think, are the transitions. Going from the 3 mile to the 5 mile, you have these little connector stretches.
Okay.
And those are a little bit tricky. So, unfortunately, they're not going to get a whole lot of track time on it. The way, as I understand it, they're going to do the qualifying for the 5 mile is going to be your fastest time between the second qualify and the second Super Tour race. Then they'll do a 20-minute practice on the 5 mile that will not be for qualifying position, but just simply for people to learn the track.
Right.
So that'll be drinking through a fire hose for people that have never been on that.
So what you're saying is Sunday should be awfully interesting on our cameras.
Yes. Yes. I mean, I feel fortunate. We only run that event typically as our regional final. We usually try and do a triple as our season finale, where we'll run this last couple of years. They've run the 2 mile track, which was the original Thunderhill track, then the 3 mile, which is the expanded version, and then they'd run the 5 mile for the third day. So we typically only run it once a year anyway. So nobody's got tons of track time. I think I've run that track maybe 4 times now total.
Sure. All right, so before we go to break, I always ask this question since I'm going to Thunderhill. And as you can tell, I am a guy who enjoys what happens after the racing is over. Where do we go for dinner on Friday or Saturday night?
Well, in the little town of Willows, I know, by the way, if you're not aware of it, at the track, they're doing dinner both Friday and Saturday night as part of the event.
Okay.
I'm not sure what the menu is, but they're doing it both nights.
Nice.
Outside of that, in Willows, there's a couple of Mexican restaurants, a Chinese restaurant. There's Nancy's at the airport. And then Orland is a little town up the road, about 10, 15 minutes. And Orland has several really nice steakhouse up there.
Good.
I can't remember the name of it off the top of my head. And it also has a deal that's it's called like the honey bee or the honey patch or some darn thing. And they've got bees in there, and a lot of the dishes have honey mixed in and stuff. So I tried it last time I was up there, and it was quite good.
All right, cool. All right, let's do this. Let's take another break, and we're going to talk a little bit more about Super Tours in general. We're going to do that when we come back. You're watching Inside the SCCA. Stay with us. We'll be right back. Decades of sports car racing success comes from Goodyear Racing Tires' dedication to grassroots motorsports. Too many trophies and championships to count, and a commitment to continuing that tradition fuels continued tire development. From the professional levels of motorsports to the pinnacle of amateur racing in the SCCA, Goodyear Racing Tires are made for winning trophies. Follow @RaceGoodyear on Facebook or scan the QR code. Goodyear Racing is more driven. The Roadkeeper HD video and data logger was developed using our experience in motorsports, driving experiences, and beyond. It brings dual stream HD video combined with high-quality GPS data within reach of everyone at the track or on the road. Travinci Systems is an official Runoffs contingency sponsor, and it's not too late to sign up. On-site registration is available at the contingency desk in Tech. The Roadkeeper HD meets SCCA's requirements for forward-facing cameras. Take advantage of 2022 Runoffs pricing for the Roadkeeper HD, $324 plus shipping. That's $75 off. Offer is good through Christmas.
Grass Paddock Motorsport provides Mini Cooper race car rentals, trackside support, and coaching at tracks all over the eastern half of the country. GPM provides podium-capable rentals for B-Spec, the fastest-growing class of racing in the SCCA, for 3 years running, and now the 4th largest class overall. We have a unique approach where our cars are located near the track you want to race instead of being in a central location with large towing fees. Come join us at Grass Paddock Motorsports, where Grass Paddock is an attitude and not a location. Mention this ad for a 10% discount and find us at www.grasspaddock.com.
Racing for Heroes is proud to be a partner of Inside the SCCA. RFH is a nonprofit devoted to helping veterans suffering from the seen and unseen wounds of war through racing and our range of programs. RFH's programs include health and wellness, motorsports therapy, community outreach, education, and employment. Visit racingforheroes.org to learn more and find out how you can help. Cruise Associates is honored to have sponsored this message. Welcome back inside the SCCA. I'm Brian Bielanski. Jim Devenport is our guest. We appreciate, Jim, you coming on. I know this was a little bit of a last-minute thing, and I know you had to rework your schedule this evening to make that work, and we really appreciate it. Thanks a lot. So real quick, as we get out of here, There's been a lot of talk about some of the interesting, how shall I say, situations during the Super Tours this year. We've had some crazy moments of weather. We've had some races with some interesting driving decisions. We've had a couple events with a lot of full course yellows. What are your thoughts on things like the Green to Checker initiative and some of the things we've dealt with this year on the Super Tour?
Yeah, the Green to Checker initiative is a good one. You just hope people would actually try and achieve that goal. All the Super Tours I've been involved in has been Circuit of the Americas, and we actually had quite a bit of green flag racing there. We did have some yellows, but we got to finish under green both races there, which is always half the fun, just being able to make it to the end and give it a run. And at Buttonwillow, we had all the rain challenges, but yet amazingly, we made it work on that short little track. And our field, the field I was in, had a lot of cars. And they ended up, the second race ended up crashed out with the FC car. So I think what they need to do is really pay attention to how many cars are in certain run groups and, adjust them around, move cars around if they need to make that happen. We're paired typically with FE2s, FCs, FX, P1, P2. I think we have 26 cars entered in the Thunderhill event coming up.
Right.
That should be okay. There's quite a bit of speed differential, but the FCs to the P1 cars. We have 5 P1 cars, 5 P2 cars, but 26 should be a manageable number. Hopefully we have green flag racing the whole time. But when we have 50 cars in this mix, that's a prescription for disaster. And that's what's happened at VIR multiple times. And I think I did not make it to the last VIR Super Tour event, so I'm not sure how that turned out. But I've been back to VIR 4 times. 3 of the times it's rained, and 3 of the times we hardly had any green flag racing. So it was very disappointing. And when that happens, it's not good for anybody. It makes the Super Tours look bad. Drivers are disappointed. So,
yeah, and you are in a group where the risk reward is really high for contact. So, even though it happens and it's Formula cars have to do things a little bit differently because they could be really unfortunate if you get wheel touching and all that kind of stuff. So, it's a little bit even more crazy on some of the sedan groups because you could rub and bump a little bit more without as much risk, allegedly. But that just makes for more bumping sometimes, and we get the same issue, right?
Yep. No, that's right. Spec racers are notorious for rubbing and stuff. When you watch the IMSA, the pro guys do it in IMSA with their 4-class structure, and you see the speed differences there, and they manage it. So, that's the mindset I take to it. Hey, look, we're in a P1 car. We're the fastest cars out here. It's our job to manage our way through the track and around the slower cars without contact. By and large, I think the P1 cars do a pretty decent job at it. They're expensive cars. None of us want to tear them up, the P1 or the P2 cars. So, it's our job to manage that as best we can.
Yeah, a lot of it comes down to driver decision making, and we're in a weird spot in the motorsports world because, not a lot of race series that we watch on television do 30-minute races. It's usually, an hour and a half or 2 hours minimum, and you've got at least 1 or 2 pit stops. And if you make a mistake in the early part of the race, you've got some time to recover. In sprint racing, you make a mistake on lap 1 or 2, you're probably not going to get on the podium in most cases. So people get kind of this mindset that we got to do it fast and we got to do everything quick, and that can lead to some trouble.
Yep. Well, obviously, the start is the most exciting part, the chance to make up the most spots, but also the chance to make the biggest mess of the whole thing as well.
Sure.
So,
yeah, a very hero to zero proposition on the start if you don't do it right.
Yep.
So. All right, any thoughts as we get out of here about this weekend in Thunderhill or the Super Tour in general?
Well, I'd like to thank San Francisco region for stepping up and really making a bold decision to host this thing. John McIntyre has been the vision behind this whole event. It was brought to my attention last fall that they were talking about doing something. And I think the original thought was maybe trying to do it just as, you know, San Francisco region hosting it on their own. I said, no. If we're going to do this, we've got to pair this up with a Super Tour event. So we're bringing the best competitors, you know, and the broadcast team and guys like yourself come to announce it. I mean, that's what makes this thing special, is having cameras around and announcers and some real excitement. We were hoping to make the 5-mile, you know, Sunday finale an extra Super Tour race. And maybe next year we'll be able to accomplish that. But the whole point of it is that it's all about finishing, high points finishes, because it's all 3 races that count for the Western Shootout winner. And it's a winners only event. So, you know, no podiums. It's all or nothing in that deal.
Well, that's a lot of cool going on, and I'm looking forward to making the big trek up. You've only got a couple of hours to go tonight. I've got an 8-hour drive tomorrow morning to get there, but I've heard a lot of good things about Thunderhill, and I've never been there before, so I look forward to. This will be my second new track I'm clicking off this year. I had never been to Hallett either and had a blast in Oklahoma, so I'm looking forward to clicking another one off the list here and getting up there. For those who are looking to watch on the live stream, all 3 days are going to be broadcast. We're going to do our normal coverage on Friday and Saturday, and then we will do our regular coverage. On Friday and Saturday, and then on Sunday we're going to have just the races. We're not going to do qualifying on Sunday, so because it's really not qualifying; it's just practice sessions. So we'll put out some posts on the Facebook page and a bunch of other places, so you know where to find the events, where all the links are, and also not to pat myself and the whole crew on our shoulders too much. But Jim, we were talking beforehand. At Hallett, we crossed over 100,000 streams. People clicking and watching us from Sebring through Hallett. We've had over 100,000 people watch the live stream coverage of the SCCA. And I, for one, I mean, I'm part of it, so I'm a little biased, but I think that's pretty darn cool.
Yeah, it really is. Let's hope we get 100,000 for this weekend.
Oh, well, you know what? All we have to do is have you put it out on your social media, because I know you've got a huge fan base, and we should be able to jump over 100,000 without any problems.
Yep. We're trying to do the driver's eye camera in our car.
Oh, cool.
Hopefully we get that all squared away tomorrow, you know, and during the practice day, test day stuff. So we're not sure. We've never tried it before, but we're hoping to have a driver's eye camera in our car.
Anybody who wants to do that, by the way, get a hold of us. You can send an email to supertourannouncers@gmail.com, and I'll get it over to the driver's eye guys, and we can help facilitate that process. The more in-car cameras we get, the better the stream is. So I'm always excited about that. So, Jim, thank you.
Great.
Good luck this weekend. Have a safe drive up tonight, and I'll stop by and we'll shake hands when we get to Thunderhill. How's that?
Great. Thanks, Brian. You have a safe drive, too.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. All right, that's going to do it for this episode of Inside the SCCA. If you like what you're hearing, subscribe to the Racingwire Podcast Network and the Racing Network on YouTube so you won't miss any episodes. It would also be great if you leave a comment, especially if it's a good one. If it's a bad one, put it on someone else's page. You can follow us on social media to find out who our next guest is and leave a question on Twitter. It's @RacingWireNet. There's a new Inside the SCCA every Wednesday night on Twitter or on YouTube, and then every Friday on our podcast network. I'm Brian Bielanski. Have a fantastic weekend. Stay safe and go play with cars. Inside the SCCA is a presentation of the Racingwire Podcast Network and Rule 15 Productions. This podcast is not affiliated with, endorsed, or sponsored by the Sports Car Club of America. The views expressed within are those of the host and our guests and not that of the SCCA.